Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And welcome to the live showcase of this year's Solarpunk Art Collab. Every year, this collaboration invites artists from around the world to imagine futures worth building together in the present. It's not a competition, and there are no winners, or rather, everyone who participates is a winner for being part of this sharing of ideas, inspiration, and expansion of our collective imagination. This year's theme was disaster preparedness, response, and relief. As climate change accelerates and communities continue to face both natural and human-made disasters, we want to ask the question of how we care for each other, how we prepare together, how we rebuild in ways that make our communities stronger than before. Throughout today's showcase, you'll see visions of mutual aid, neighborhood resilience, specialized knowledge, and a lot more. Some of these pieces blew my mind. Some of these pieces depicted moments of crisis, others were focused more on preparation, others on the rebuilding. Some will lean more into the high-tech imagination, and others will be very grounded and accessible in the DIY trend within Solarpunk. So, so before we get, so we be, my apologies. Before we begin, I wanted to give a special thanks to ALXD, who's in the chat, for his continued support throughout this art collaboration. This would not be possible without his help. And a special shout out to him and his team for the Story Seed Library, a link below, where you can find Creative Commons Solarpunk art and ideas, including eventually some of these pieces. They should be uploaded in a few days or weeks. Thank you, of course, goes to every artist who contributed their time, creativity, and care to this project. Thank you to everyone who shared ideas throughout the process, even if they didn't contribute art. They offered feedback or encouraged others and helped to make this collaboration what it is. As we go through the artwork today, I encourage you to take your time with each piece. Notice the details, think about the stories they're telling, think about the kinds of communities they imagine, and what we could potentially learn from those communities. With that said, let's begin with the presentation, followed by, of course, a look at the descriptions of each piece. All right, all right, all
Greetings,
right.
Hobbits. This is our
What did y'all
Sands of
think of
Vor.
that? I was very much inspired by the pieces that I saw, and a lot of them came with really stimulating descriptions that I think will add to your appreciation of each piece. So, to begin with, we have Winter Punk, Austin's DIY response to disaster by Agrias Starfox. This piece is an artistic rendition of a photograph by Michael Minasi for KUT Austin, Texas. And Agrias Starfox wrote that Solarpunk appeals to me personally because I see it as the logical evolution of punk ethos, direct action, DIY, mutual aid, not charity, and environmentalism, without a singular savior or hero. Some people imagine Solarpunk or any other ideology as wishful thinking because they may be unaffected by sweeping changes to the environment such as global warming or pollution. This is especially true for my location, the US. We don't have to wait for the world to become worse to change our course. Austinites were able to help each other through a catastrophic event caused by global warming and poor structural engineering just by pooling resources and mobilizing. And so the piece itself is inspired by, like I said, a photograph. In this photograph, and this photograph was depicting the scene during the winter storms in Austin, Texas in February of 2021, when many people banded together to create and provide resources beyond what was provided by the city or state governments. St. Elmo Brewing Company, a locally owned business, used its commercial distilleries to create sanitary water for people for free. People banded together in groups such as Austin Mutual Aid to pick up water and meals to distribute to people, as well as providing hotel rooms to homeless people. University of Texas students used their Twitter followings to create spreadsheets to track needs for people such as blankets, clothes, and water, and pool together money to provide these resources for other students and city residents. So although this piece may, at first glance just seem to be a regular scene, there's a very compelling story behind it. A story of a community banding together in times of crisis, which is what this whole collaboration was meant to be about. Next, we have Cattails in Hurricane Season by Art by a Day. It is, and this is their description, it is the early to midsummer in southeastern Virginia during hurricane season. In order to prepare, members of the community would forage for edible and medicinal plants ready to harvest. They would split off into groups of 2 or 3 based on whatever edible plant they were supposed to find. Each person carries a zine that helps with identifying the plants they're looking for. In this scene, these two are looking for cattails. The plants included in the art are the oaks, pines, and sycamores in the background, as well as cattails and pickerel weed. The character design is very unique. I noticed that one of the characters has almost like, I don't know how to describe it, it's almost like anthropomorphic, but anthropomorphic is more along the lines of animals, but this is reminding more of plants. Like the character to the left kind of seems to have like an oaky kind of look to them with their hairstyle and with their top and everything. And the character to the right, well, I don't even recognize that kind of plant. Their hairstyle kind of reminds me of coral almost. But it's really cool to see a depiction of people, foraging in their local environment and making use of what is available. Wild bergamot. Okay, interesting. I've never heard of that before. The next piece we have is Heat Relief on Hot Nights by Kat Warren. I live in the desert. We already have multiple dozens of heat deaths per year with the homeless population I provide services to, and nights can frequently reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I foresee it becoming worse as climate change intensifies. Thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this. Now, this piece leans in both a contemporary direction and also a sort of a futuristic direction. I mean, we have a lot of these technologies already, but they're brought together in this scene to depict what looks to be obviously people helping an injured person on the ground onto a stretcher, a floating stretcher of some kind. We have what looks to be a floating rail system. We have the drone technology, and we have, unfortunately, the use of Fahrenheit in the future, which is disappointing to me as a Celsius enjoyer. 100 degrees Fahrenheit is how much in Celsius? Let me check. 37 degrees. And unfortunately, things are worse in much of the world right now. I heard in parts of Europe it's gone over 40. Brilliant piece though. Lovely to see it. So shout out to Cat Warren. The next piece is multiple pieces by Qualpole. So they give a bit of an introduction first. They all explore similar concepts with slightly varying scope. Qualpole allowed themselves to play with the core idea that they came up with, which was communities building and maintaining semi-autonomous and semi-mobile raised platforms with native ecosystems integrated into their framework that can be tailored for whatever the community needs, whether it be living and transportation, storage, or whatever. These omnipods will facilitate a more nomadic lifestyle for many people who choose to move with their paths, making roads as we know them in our reality almost obsolete as the constant urgency to get somewhere quickly is replaced with the ease of getting somewhere eventually. The different pieces explore potential scenarios and communities that may develop in a world with such grand objects. Many of these are not to be used forever, and their lifetime is taken into account on creation. How long they will last is in each part of their life stages depends on the community's purpose for them. Sometimes they will start standing and then move, or they will start off moving and then still. They will all collapse eventually and degrade in the ecosystem they are native in. Since they will be filled with native plants, they will aim to not bring any invasive organisms into the ecosystem. It is the community's responsibility to take care of them in this way throughout their lifetime and end of life. And they used acrylic paint for most of the base colors, with markers and pens for some of the detail work. Now, the first thing that this reminds me of is there's this video game, except it's not like technology, it's this giant walking dinosaur-like creature. I cannot remember the name of the game, but you have to like manage like a village on top of that creature as it's like walking through a bunch of landscapes. So it reminds me of that. It also reminds me of, again, not remembering the name. There was a movie about based on a book a couple years ago where like cities were on wheels and they were like eating other cities, and like I think the story was based on like a mobile London. Um, so if anybody remembers in the chat what those two things were, but this idea of people living on the backs of some kind of mobile, whether it be living thing or object, I've seen it in a couple works of fiction. It is on that more kind of high tech, fantastical side of Solarpunk, but it's still cool to see how you took this concept and explored it in some interesting ways. So this first piece is called the Community Exchange, where different communities would live on potential giant semi-autonomous omnipods that barely move very fast. They will allow for people to exchange and change platforms. We also see in this next piece, a seed bank regenerates, an invasive woodland fire or a mobile seed bank goes to die peacefully. This piece inspired by the artist living in California Olone territory and seeing so many eucalypts along the hills and feeling a sense of ominousness from their potential to devastate the land far worse than the native ecosystem can handle. Much of the habitat is a chaparral ecosystem that has evolved to withstand fire, but not at the intensity that the eucalypts burn. Eucalyptus, I think. If and when they erupt into showering sparks of flames, the fire will burn through what little of the underbrush there is and cause many landslides due to the ash and unstable ground. The omnipod in the piece results from the community preparing for such a thing. When it is just safe to return to devastated land, the community sends in an omnipod that has been acting as a local seed bank to help with regenerating the land with native species of plants. While there will be obviously lots of more work to do, like removing the invasive eucalyptus seedlings that sprout from the fires. The Omnipod acts as a beacon of hope for the community that will help radiate their love of the land outwards from the platform. Very cool. I think it's one of my favorite of the concepts that you presented here. The third piece is a community storing of seeds, which is sort of a prequel to the previous piece. This piece was made with no particular ecosystem in mind, whereas the previous one was thinking of a mainly eucalyptus invaded land. This omnipod has been sitting here stationary, being worked on and filled up with seeds for many years. It has not moved in all that time. There will be a day that it will move and it could look like the previous piece. In the meantime, it acts as a community hub and gives purpose to the people who maintain it. The colors are very vibrant because it brings a lively and hopeful vibe to those maintaining it. Beautiful. It's almost like a mobile, at least this one is semi-stationary, though still capable of being mobile version of the, what do you call that seed bank? There's a seed bank to the north of Norway. Okay, and somebody in the chat shouted out the book slash movie was Mortal Machines. That's right. Um, there's a seed bank to the north of Norway. It's called Svalbard, right? Svalbard Global Seed Vault. So these kind of remind me of that as well, in the sense that you have these storage sites where seeds can be kept and protected in the event of emergencies or disasters. The final piece Quapo introduced was quickened road to the hospital. With no cars, roads will still will be needed for necessities like quickly bringing the injured to places where they can be treated by healthcare individuals. People will always need doctors and ways to access that healthcare. Removing the obstacles to that was a huge inspiration for this piece. I wondered what it would look like if the ambulance didn't have to weave through other automobiles to get to the destination. I chose to have the vehicle resemble closer to the kind of vehicles we see today because they are built more for speed and urgency. I chose to use more simple and pastel colors to show that this reality isn't that far off from our current one compared to the other pieces I made with this theme. End quote. So thank you to Qualpo for this amazing collection of pieces. Next, we have the Tokyo Pedals Forward piece presented by the Cycling Embassy of Japan. Now, typically, we've accepted the work of individual artists, but collective contributions like these are most certainly welcome. In doing my research, I found out that this was an NGO. The Cycling Embassy of Japan is not tied to the Japanese government. It's an NGO dedicated to promoting cycling as a healthy, socially responsible, economically sustainable, and environmentally friendly means of transportation, the support and betterment of which can only improve the design of our cities, the health of our communities within them, and the lifestyles of individuals within those. End quote. This is from their website. And as for the description of their piece, in this interactive artwork, we explore how a city like Tokyo can strengthen its disaster resilience through community participation, with bicycles serving as a practical and accessible tool for post-disaster support. The composition is structured as a timeline, illustrating a progression from present-day capabilities left to potential future innovations to the right. It highlights existing resources such as mobile communication devices and conventional battery storage systems, while envisioning future developments including micro-renewable energy technologies, fleets of electric emergency response bicycles, and rapidly deployable emergency shelters. Together, these elements present a vision of a more resilient and self-sufficient community, demonstrating how citizens, technology, and local infrastructure can work together to support each other in the aftermath of a disaster. The piece is further detailed with these descriptions. I wonder if I could make it a little bit clearer. Right, so you have the human powered technology with bikes. You have acoustics being enjoyed. The technology, the infrastructure is built to repair. They have bike responders able to move and weave quickly through, emergency situations. Tradition of clean, which I suppose is meant to represent the care people are placing in the maintenance of the environment. Kids will be kids, depicting, of course, that even in disaster and in the aftermath of disaster, children will continue to enjoy their bikes and continue to enjoy their lives. And finally, design forward, which I think is an interesting take on quick drop pod, right, rapidly deployable emergency shelters. Very cool. Let me fix this now. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Right. Continuing right along, we have Community Aid Network by Danielle Tortorici. I hope I got that right. Quote, a united, compassionate, and resilient community comes together in times of crisis. By the way, this is the coloring page, and we have the full illustration here. A coordinated network of volunteers provides rescue efforts, medical assistance, and warm meals to people displaced by an environmental disaster. Everyone can contribute, even those without specialized training. While it is wise not to rely entirely on technology, it can also play a crucial role in managing critical situations by streamlining both physical operations and organizational efforts, helping communities respond more effectively when every moment counts. But as on all, emotional support is just as important. When people feel safe, protected, and supported by their community, they're more willing to give back and help others in return, creating a positive cycle that benefits everyone. This is also a very beautiful piece. I mean, obviously, we have some more fantastical technology with the hologram rescue planning, but you also have the very human touch of, you know, just a repairman helping an injured child, spending time with an injured child, or a community kitchen in the background, feeding the injured. These little touches, I think, transcend the specifics of the time or the place of the technology because these are human activities, these are human things, sharing food, providing healthcare, planning and organizing support to those in need. Beautiful piece. Next up is D. Lyon's Neighborhood Care. It's the third flood in as many years, but these neighbors have built a pretty resilient local system to prepare themselves. Basement apartment residents are boxing up their treasured memories and preparing to catch the last community bus service across town, or for sleepovers with their upstairs neighbors. Projector drones, equipped with the latest forecasts, are followed around by the local children brandishing chalk, marking up the walls so the sandbag teams know how high to stack before moving on to the next house. The local communication network becomes a community aid message board, so assistance is never far away. And since the shared tool sheds were built on every street last year, responders can travel light and work fast. They've learned to rely on each other, and they know they'll be okay because, as the graffitied old neighborhood watch poster in the window says, this neighborhood cares. Again, a very, very thoughtful piece. This could be really anywhere in the world tomorrow. You know, aside from maybe the projected drone, not everywhere might have that. But these simple touches, as you know, children working together with the crew that's putting out the sandbags, or the fact that with a flooding risk, that upstairs neighbors would help downstairs neighbors. It's a beautiful and grounded depiction of exactly what I have in mind when I think of Solarpunk. Because again, it demonstrates exactly the kind of reciprocal and care and relations that we want to foster. The next piece is floodplain restoration, levee removal, and house shifting. by Jacob Coffin. Levees have reshaped river landscapes all over North America, allowing people to fill in wetlands and build homes, farms, and sometimes entire towns directly on floodplains. As climate change worsens floods, it's becoming clear that just building higher walls to hold back the water isn't enough. Ceding some land, which was perhaps never suitable for development in the first place, to nature, can improve both human safety and the health of the ecosystem which surround and support us. When levees are moved back even half a mile, we see huge improvements. Wetlands reform and reconnect, habitats full of native species begin to thrive, and the river has room to meander and spread during floods. This scene depicts a small piece of the hard, bittersweet work of relocating the levees and the people who live behind them. Work crews are using a cargo airship to shift a family home further inland, while others remove the levee and reconnect to nearby wetlands. Eventually, they'll plant willows, cottonwoods, wapato, or other suitable native species. So that's the brief description. Coffin also provided a longer description. I just wanted to pull out a few things from the description. I believe the full description will be available when it's uploaded on the Storyseed library. Coffin goes into the history that humans have been building levees in his country since colonization, as part of an unending campaign to civilize the land, smoothing out rough terrain, straightening and concealing rivers, filling in wetlands, and generally drying out the continent. These shifting rivers and sprawling wetlands were generally inconvenient to farmers and other settler types who prized floodplains for farmland and development. To protect their new territory from flooding, they built thousands of miles of levees along nearly every major waterway, constraining their movement until some looked more like canals than natural rivers. This was disastrous for the species which had evolved to occupy the niches now buried under levees and fill, but it also hasn't worked out great for humanity. In a narrowed, straightened river, that surge of water has nowhere to go, and nothing to slow its movement. As climate change alters weather patterns, intensifies storms, and worsens both drought and floods, we're seeing frequent levee failures as 100 and 1,000-year floods become routine events. So obviously, a lot of people would have built their homes in these spaces, and memories would have been made, families would have been raised, and people have sentimental attachment to the places that they live, to their neighborhoods. But a lot of these places where neighborhoods have sprung up, whether it be in floodplains, whether it be in wildfire zones, they were never suitable for development in the first place. They should have been left to the wild. And so we're going to have to, in Coffin's words, reckon with that in the coming decades, whether we're in a solarpunk society or not. We're already seeing the beginnings in our present, with insurance companies refusing to cover some areas and floodplain buyouts. So in the piece itself, there's a lot being done to rewild the site, and obviously the timeline is compressed. The shifting of the home, the removing of the levee, the digging of the channel to reconnect the wetlands will probably all be separate stages of work, but Coffin has jammed them all into one shot for expedience, of course. Also, I was skeptical about this giant airship and its practicality, but Coffin does have an explanation, some reasoning behind it. We'll get to that in a second. This would be a big day, I'm quoting again, for these work crews. After weeks of planning and work of emptying the home, disconnecting it from its utilities and foundation, removing a porch, and jacking it up so they can assemble a frame underneath, a flying crane cargo airship has finally arrived to hoist the house up into its hold to carry it away. So the airship for the task being depicted does not actually exist. However, Coffin provides a description of the closest fit being an LCA 60T, which was intended to work as a flying crane, but it has a narrow, long cargo hold. So it could potentially fit a mobile home or pieces of modular home designed to be transported by truck, but it would not be a good choice for a larger structure. So this technology is speculative, but there is a precedent for cargo airships. And so it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility, based on what Coffin has described, that such relocation could take place. Especially when we consider that we wouldn't necessarily want to just demolish everything that is in these floodplains, just in these. We want to repurpose them if possible, relocate them if possible. If we can't relocate them, we'd want to deconstruct them, and reuse the materials, salvage the materials that are there, rather than allowing it to pile up in landfills. A lot of food for thought in this piece is clearly very well thought out, and so big up Jacob Coffin. Next, we have Tectonic Activity Aid Team by Jiskra. A relief team operating in an area ravaged by earthquakes gathers intel and distributes aid. Rescue forces equipped for the most extreme conditions venture into the field, accompanied by remote support from drone operators and seismologists working at the HQ. So from left to right, it looks like one of the workers is resting. I would assume if they're on call, they wouldn't want to leave the place that they're operating from. So, headphones over your ears, a little mask, and you can knock out there. That's if I'm reading the art correctly. In the room through the doorway, it seems that there are people preparing to go out into the field or to pull out certain bits of information. Those at the desk seem to be doing the same thing, preparing, and behind them, the crew about to head out the door. What I appreciate, I think, most about this piece is the fact that the interior is not the defaultism interior design style that has permeated basically every workplace ever. It's a warm space. It's an inviting space. There's greenery within the space. It's not like tile ceiling and fluorescent lights. Like it's comfortable, it's human, it's welcoming. So I appreciate that tremendously. The next piece is the Lynden Street 8 Dock by Lindsay Brown. I want to show how my street could respond to a flood if one were to happen tomorrow in my town in Louisiana, USA. On June 15th, we experienced a lot of flooding in town, and while the water did not get as high as in my illustration, it has made me think about how I will need to work with neighbors to provide food, water, sandbags, a charging station, a med station, a washing area, and of course, a social area. A lot of people where I live keep boats. I imagine people would float around to help people and go in search of aid. During Hurricane Katrina in 2005, a number of people down south formed an ad hoc group called the Cajun Navy and worked outside, but sometimes with the government, to help those in the flooding. The group has splintered and some of the groups are non-profits now, but there is a precedent for a flotilla of Louisiana Solarpunks at some point in the future. This is, again, a very grounded scene. The depiction of, the various tents, it's very ad hoc. It's very, we're bringing together what materials we have available to support the community. And I think the community will benefit tremendously from it. I'm seeing people socializing, I'm seeing people sharing aid, and that stretches all the way into the horizon. I love the composition and the use of color. It's a great piece. Next, we have Disaster Response by Nick Felton. It shows preparation for a reconnaissance flight over a larger flooded area, with the crew checking the environment and weather and installing equipment. This one is a lot more, I think, like this is a very organized group, a very planned crew, like specialists. I like the design of the plane quite a lot. I'm not sure what those kinds of planes are used for, but it's a beautiful design. I like the bird on the tail. And the color is almost reminded me, like it feels like something that could be like a Cartoon Network show. So I don't know, something about it is like, oh, this is like a special limited series, like an altered carbon or something, which is not altered carbon. Why am I saying not altered carbon? Sorry, Scavenger's Reign, which is not Cartoon Network affiliated, but it's a show, a style. I think you could see a show coming out of it, basically. Like I'm picturing following this crew from episode to episode with their helping people and their community conflicts and conflict resolutions. This piece is Reporting Broken Braille Trails by Pixel Glade. A cane user in high visibility clothing is studying broken Braille trails near a park. She's reporting the situation with her phone. This artwork demonstrates the disability inclusiveness aspect of Solarpunk and respect for community and human work. A lot of cleanup after disasters is usually done by volunteers, but this artwork challenges that notion by showing a blind person employed to report on broken Braille trails and paths. In my view, post-disaster budgets should include a fair living wage for cleanup work and show a basic respect for people regardless of their physical or financial capacity to volunteer. Those with disabilities who want to help should be able to and play an active role. This artwork is influenced by my experience with storms and floods in Brisbane, Australia. I had never even thought of this, which really goes to show, I suppose, the privilege that comes with being able bodied. And so I think that this artwork exists and it could call an issue like this to one's attention that otherwise you may not even notice. I think is brilliant. And it's exactly the kind of thing I want to see with solarpunk art, getting us to think about the less noticed among us and their needs and how they can contribute to meeting those needs and to being part of these communities of care that we so strive for. And part of having a community of care is looking out for the disabled and their accommodations, like Braille trails. Next is Death to Dirt by Ricky Z. And it reminds me of, I think in one of my previous live streams, I had spoken about the fact that I think that when I die, I would want my body to be composted. I would want to be buried with a tree or something so that the tree could feed off of my nutrients. This piece has a similar approach in mind. I'll read the description. My primary inspiration for Death to Dirt is human composting. Although it sounds gruesome, the process is merely another option of death care, along with other traditional methods like burial and cremation. Essentially, a human body will be placed in a pod with the ideal environmental conditions for being transformed into usable compost. I would like to credit this video by Ask a Mortician, and they link the video, for much of the knowledge I've learned about the process. In this piece, we can see the funerary wake of a community leader and beloved family member. As her body is taken into the pod, her loved ones gather to place a fire poppy upon her shrouded body and pay their respects. The smoky hellscape in the background is a reference to the past and ongoing wildfires in California, where the scene takes place. Despite having died in the disaster, she still wanted to use her final asset, her body, to feed and nourish the earth. In the 3 panels below, one can see each of the 3 people who attended the funeral using the compost that once was her. This rich soil continues to feed her family's houseplants, rejuvenates soil ravaged by wildfires, and supplements community gardens that will feed future generations. Human composting is currently only legal in a few states in the US, but offers a cheap and sustainable deathcare alternative that creates minimal emissions and uses very little land. Love the composition of this piece. I love how it tells a story. And I would encourage others to volunteer their bodies, to donate their bodies, not to the science necessarily, but to Mother Earth. Next, we have Disaster Response Power Plant by Scandinavian 101. My art depicts an emergency power generation unit. Following a tsunami, the affected community is slowly gathering and rebuilding, but to provide immediate power supply, this unit was deployed. Several floating power turbines with colorful schemes painted by their crews. Oh, by the way, just cut it into the description here. These things that you might have seen in other Solarpunk art, it almost feels to me like what ALXD talks about, like a hieroglyph, a shorthand representation of what we're dealing with as a Solarpunk world. And so I looked into it. And these are apparently really in development. They've been in development for some time with limited application so far. They're called Airborne Wind Energy Systems, or AWES. So you can look that up for more information on that. Continuing the description, these floating power turbines are connected to a mobile battery unit, which then provides power to the community. A camp for the displaced people and several basic medical facilities are directly receiving the power. So this piece doesn't have any people in view, but you see people's activity. You see the mark of people's activity using existing infrastructure and semi-speculative technology to respond in the event of a disaster. Exactly what this theme is all about. Next, we have two pieces submitted under the same title, a collaboration between the Lemonot and Scandinavian 101, simply titled Heli Rescue, with a very brief description. A rescue operation in the aftermath of a flood set in an unknown location. So this is Scandinavian 101's piece, and this is Lemonot's. And this is the coloring book version of Lemonot's piece, and this is Lemonot's fully illustrated edition. I really like the possum on the side of the helicopter, the variety of personalities on display. I really like seeing facial expressions and expressiveness and personality and such in art, because it really puts you into the scene. Like, I can look at these characters and see some glimpse of the fact that they do indeed have different personalities. They may not even, like Lebanon may not even have names for them, but I could already almost like, oh, that guy kind of looks like a Roberto, you know, or that lady looks like a Diane, right? I like that kind of. As this is why I really appreciate a lot of Lemonard's pieces, um, for that human touch and that very distinctive style. And so this is, a very familiar scene for those who have seen the aftermath of natural disasters. Helicopter rescues, people on roofs dealing with the aftermath of flooding. And I like the way that both Scandinavian 101 and the Lemonot have taken different approaches to the same composition. Next we have Harvest Festival Dozinki. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. It's Polish. I wish ALXD was on live with me to pronounce it for me, but this is set in Kashubia, Poland, by the artist Vizuza. This piece is again very detailed, very dynamic, a lot of stuff going on. The annual Harvest Festival descends from the centuries old Polish and Kashubian harvest celebrations, held by the end of the summer. It is no longer only a celebration of crops, but a place to strengthen resilience and promote doshinki. Doshinki. Right. Thank you. The traditional The traditional time of harvest festival, the end of summer, is also the driest time of the year, with the biggest wildfire impact. So there is a seed exchange event with many of the seeds being saved and used to regenerate the burnt areas. Farms operate through community-supported partnerships. Residents purchase shares in local farms, sharing both the harvests and the risks of a difficult growing season. If drought or fire destroys crops, members can choose to accept community credits instead of produce, helping farmers to recover. In the illustration, we can see the farmers' booths, stands, and people gathered around them. Wildfire prevention has become a major community effort. Instead of relying solely on cleared fire breaks, residents have created living resilience corridors throughout the landscape. Wetlands, ponds, community gardens, orchards, and Hugelkultur mounds built from decaying wood help retain water, support biodiversity, and slow the spread of fire. It's visible in the surrounding landscape. The scars of recent wildfire are still visible during this year's festival. Burned tree trunks stand on the horizon. Partially charred logs are being repurposed into new Hugelkultur beds, which are raised garden mounds built from buried logs, branches, and organic matter that stores water and slowly releases nutrients as it decomposes. One of the most recognizable groups present in the festival is the Beaver People Guild. Decades earlier, they began as volunteers working to reverse generations of drainage and forest amelioration. By filling abandoned drainage ditches, restoring wetlands, and increasing the land's ability to retain water, they helped bring moisture back into the landscape. What began as a grassroots movement has since become a respected civic institution. The beaver has become a symbol of ecological restoration throughout the region. Last but not least, there is music present all throughout the festival, which helps people connect and relieve their hardships. Many activities, not relive, oh god, relieve their hardships. Many activities and actions during the festival radiate around water, because this element is the protagonist of this world. Again, a longer description, but clearly a very thoughtful piece. And as many in the chat are saying, the beaver statue is fantastic. It's incredible. I like the radial elements of the piece as well. As you mentioned, water is the theme, but just the way the seats are laid out around the stage, the way the path meanders through the scene, it really draws the eyes and allows you to kind of follow a story as you're going through. And last but not least, we have the final piece of this year's art collaboration, Flowing City by Zoe Fisher. I try to depict how communities can prepare for/manage extreme weather periods in the form of sustainable architecture and urban design. Parks and green areas act as sponges, soaking up overflowing water while flooding and slowly releasing it in dry periods. Canals and ponds lead the water out of the housing areas and store it underground, where it could potentially be used for harvesting. Communal gardens help the neighborhood to support itself when transportation of goods fails. The windows are inspired by Islamic mashrabiyas, which are a genius way to cause air circulation inside houses and keep them cool during dry periods. Although, of course, here it seems to be a wet period. The green awning is a new invention used to cool streets that could potentially also be used to regulate water flow. I believe it is crucial to put new inventions as well as old techniques to practice in order to adjust to the challenges you will be facing and to work together to adapt. And that interweaving of the old and the new, that balancing of the human, the natural, if you even draw the distinction, and technology, is what I love to see explored in unique ways in Solarpunk art. So we're seeing here traditional architectural style combined with this apparent green awning technology and use of, well, this is not really new, but managing the control of the flow of water to store it and to keep it and to harvest it for later use. There seems to be a yearning between these characters as well. I don't know, the story is there, but again, it adds to the story behind the piece, and it's just beautiful. So once again, thank you to all of the artists who came together and made this year perhaps one of the best of the Solarpunk art collaborations. Y'all killed it, really and truly. And I hope to see even more artists participate in next year's art collaboration. Or, there are whispers of potentially doing this more frequently than just once a year. You can let me know your thoughts in the Discord. We have a dedicated art collaboration, Solarpunk art collaboration Discord. You can jump in, even if you're not an artist yourself. You can contribute to the discussions around the composition of the pieces, the collaborations taking place, and just be part of stimulating the imagination and what's possible. You know, I learned things looking through this art and reading the descriptions. Maybe some of you learn things as well. And that's what I appreciate about this kind of art, that it can be an educational resource as well as an imagination stimulant. Thanks again to ALXD. Shout out to the Storyseed library, also linked in the description. Many of these pieces will be on that library at some point in the near future. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in. All power to all the people. Peace.